Hello, and welcome virtually to the Bell Hooks Center at Berea College, where we marry the college's longstanding great commitment to gender equity with its great commitment to racial equity in order to think intersectionally about power and difference. And welcome especially to our very first event, a talk with our inaugural artist in residence, the talented and inimitable Milwaukee-based artist, Rosie Petrie. Petrie describes herself as a mother, artist, and storyteller. In 2020, she received the Mildred Harpel Artist of the Year Award from the City of Milwaukee Board and was selected as a Mary L. Knoll Emerging Artist Fellow. In 2019, as the 11th Pfister Artist in Residence, she created a space to showcase her fabric portraits and record podcast interviews and to celebrate traditions of the African diaspora. The prior year, Petrie was a Milwaukee Artist Resource Network mentee under another iconic Black feminist artist, Della Wells. Petrie's work can be viewed in several prominent Milwaukee locations, including the Pitzer Hotel, where Shavanda's Bridal High Tea, a legacy piece, commemorates her residency. You can also find her pieces at the Northwestern Mutual's Giving Gallery, where her gestural portrait series Together is featured, and at the Milwaukee County Courthouse, where her Milwaukee, Wisconsin series is installed outside of the county's executive's office. Petrie's art and fine craft can be found at www.thisisparadisehome.com. I encourage you to spend some time there perusing her generative works. In today's talk, Petrie reflects on the impact of the last year on her creative process, about being a working artist in tumultuous times, about community record keeping and culture bearing, and about the lack of equity in creative spaces. Petrie will also talk about how cross-disciplinary collaborations between artists and community members can provide a pathway to cultivating healing and authentic change for how we understand power and difference. You are welcome to ask questions throughout, either through the Q&A or chat functions on your Zoom dashboard. We will address your questions at the end. Without further delay, Rosie Petrie.
The inaugural artist in residence here at the Bell Hooks Center has welcomed me while I've been here. Bear with me while we go through this kind of presentation. The internet is kind of a little dicey, but I'm going to do my best to share with you some of the things that I have seen, some of the adventures I've had, some of the misadventures, and then also some of the artwork that came out of those experiences. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I just learned how to do this. Prior to the pandemic, I had actually never used Zoom. So this is a whole new experience for me. So we've got some screen share and we are going to go to full screen. All right, so 2020, I was finishing up my residency at the Pfister Hotel. Milwaukee was getting prepared to host the Democratic National Convention. And we were getting ready, like the basketball situation in Milwaukee was incredible. There were lots of things happening. Everyone was feeling really excited about opportunities. The pandemic hit. My residency came to a pretty abrupt halt. We ended early for safety. And then a couple of weeks into the pandemic, George Floyd was killed. And I think that day changed the world. It changed my experience, it changed my feelings. It brought generations of painful reminders back to the foreground of reality because we weren't distracted anymore by sports. We weren't out and about. We were at home watching violence happen in a very real and immediate sense. So this piece was created for the Wisconsin Quilt and Fiber Arts Museum in response to their quarantine quilt call. everybody was doing things about being locked down. Everyone was doing things about the isolation, the loneliness. And all I could think about was the public lynching of Black people, acknowledging it. So this was kind of the first piece post-pandemic that I worked on. And when it happened, I realized I had to do something. Thankfully, while I was processing this stuff, I had joined a book group, and we were reading Adrienne Maree Brown's Emergent Strategy and discussing it. It was a group of maybe 25 or so Black folks who were processing through study group possible change of future. And I'm really glad I had that group when everything started happening, because I was able to process with the group how I was feeling, how they were feeling, and action started right away. So this image is an illustration of one of the participants in the Women's March organized by local Milwaukee organizers. El Halo and Sheba was the Women's March in response to the violent killings of Black folks across the country, not just men, but also women and folks of marginalized gender. I saw this photograph taken by Puggs, Daniel Puggs, and I knew that this was something that I wanted to look into, I wanted to express, I wanted to be present with. And most importantly, I really wanted to remember, even as it was happening, that this history is so fundamentally American. I didn't want it to be erased, and I didn't want it to be lost. So this is where we begin the Knoll Project. Through that book club, the study group, I was able to connect with a lot of Black women and Black mage organizers to talk about the community work that they were doing while they were organizing through the pandemic of racism, and to hear 24 other people's personal stories of what they were enduring, how they were organizing, where they were supporting their communities when other folks had failed them, was something that was a really important light for me last year. And it really informed up until now, really, just to hear these folks discussing the things that they were doing within their communities, very grassroots, lots of beautiful inspirational stories, a lot of heartache, but then also just the humanity of each individual and their deep compassion and love for their community, for their people, for the city, for the rage in their hearts, and also the legacy of civil rights organizing that they were carrying on. So the idea of this project was born in that study group after the murder of George Floyd. And I thought to myself, we are living through history, and while it's painful, it's important that we remember it. So I proposed doing this project, and with some of the group members, put out a call. And this is a self-selected group of 24 folks who volunteered to help craft the project, choose topics, sit through interviews, have a photo session, and then ultimately these illustrations are the first step in the project series. I was notified that I did get a Knoll Fellowship to support this work about October. And what that meant is that it made it possible for me to not only be financed to continue and pursue the work, but also to pay all of the participants equitably for their time, pay the photographer, and then make sure that these stories are going to have a platform, an opportunity to be seen, and then also just giving other folks the opportunity to witness some of the folks that I found light in this really dark time. This illustration is of one of our participants. Her name is Marquesa Tucker. And this is kind of the second phase of this project. It's still ongoing with an indefinite ending. The first phase was those illustrations. The second phase was actually to bring in this new medium of color. I don't generally use pigment. I usually work exclusively with fabric, but something about the supply chain during the pandemic, as well as the genuine fear of leaving the house to go out into the world and get supplies, meant I had to come up with a new way of working. So this is one of the first pieces that I did with color. And I realized that art and graphic art has been a really strong tool historically of sharing community stories. So I just wanted to share this piece with y'all before it gets out into the world, but to acknowledge that there are more new things that are coming out of something that was really painful. As inspiration for my Knoll project, I thought about the work of Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston was a folklorist and ethnographer and a cultural icon that was contemporaries with Langston Hughes, part of the Harlem Renaissance. And she also worked with Alan Lomax to record songs and stories in the fields. And one of the things about Zora that strikes me, or that has always struck me, is I had never heard until that point my own voice on paper. I had never seen it. I'd never experienced it in a mass-produced way. And so when Jody Alexander handed me a copy of Their Eyes Are Watching God and I read it, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, I realized that I had a debt to pay to Zora Neale Hurston, and in this moment of history that it would be a good idea to follow in her footsteps and ask questions and make recordings and talk with my community about what we were experiencing. Whether it was going to make the front page or not, the process was for us. So this year's body of work is kind of dedicated in the spirit of Zora Neale Hurston and Alice Walker and Toni Morrison and bell hooks. And I'm really, really pleased to share it with all of you. So we're going to jump into the idea of community record keeping and culture bearing. This image is a digital collage of hands made by fabric. And it was the idea of something handmade coming into the digital world, which is basically the experience of creating my project this year. Because of the pandemic, we were not sure if it was going to be okay for us to do the project in the way that we originally wanted. Everything was supposed to be done in person. Everything was supposed to be done with a photographer. It was going to be a pretty compact process, but it really took the entirety of the year for us to build this project because we had to adapt to the limitations the pandemic brought. We didn't know if there would be a vaccination. We didn't know if it was safe to be together with or without masks. And so it kind of created this new challenge, but also allowed us a lot of opportunity to explore making do. So like I said, prior to the pandemic, I had never used Zoom, but over the last year, I conducted all of my interviews over Zoom. The only time we were able to meet in person was very, very limited windows when we did single person photo sessions. And we were able to adapt to make our record and to create this community that allowed us to process the pain and also the isolation and the confusion, and to be supported by other Black folks through our journey of pain, of processing, and of collective work. For me, the idea of oral history, or at least folk history, because I'm not a trained oral historian, is to allow ourselves to tell our own stories in our own voices and to birth our own narratives. This image was created just before 2020 during my Pfister residency. It's called Saseya, and this is the depiction of Black women in a joyful pregnancy. The idea is that we are not treated with human dignity is something that has been really, really resonant and focal for me. And that makes people uncomfortable to talk about. But the reality is just because it makes you uncomfortable doesn't mean that we get to sweep it under the rug and deny that there has been a betrayal of humanity for Black folks. So I learned about this idea through a webinar on community history. I heard the phrase ways of knowing. I'd never heard it before this year. And when I heard it, I realized that was something that resonated with me because I think that we as Black folks do have a flavor of communicating. Blackness isn't a monolith, but culturally we are perpetually evolving our language, our communication, our music, our clothing. And the idea that we can use those forms of creation to express ourselves as well as share history and knowledge with each other was really important to me. So I started thinking a lot more about storytelling. This series is called the Negro League series, and this was inspired by the idea of storytelling. I grew up a huge fan of baseball. I watched my mom play. She was awesome. I learned how to keep score. I remember going to my first baseball game at Wrigley Field, and it's just, baseball has always been with me, and it's a really great example of the great American secret of racism, because we know the Negro Leagues existed. What I didn't know until last year was that not only did the Negro Leagues exist and that there was a women's professional league as well, but that Black women were not allowed to play on the women's league. So they played with the men. So there were 3 professional Black women who played baseball in the Negro Leagues with Satchel, Willie, and Jackie. So Tony Stone, Connie Morgan, and Mamie Peanut Jenkins were kind of the beginning inspiration for this piece, which then kind of became a symbol of the experience of exclusion and excellence in spite of, and reminded me to ask myself, what other stories aren't being told that are right in our faces, maybe right under our noses? And this Negro Leagues theme kind of stuck with me. So this is another piece from that series. In addition to the turmoil, we also lost a very, very important Milwaukee philanthropist connector, Hank Aaron. I started making this piece before Hank passed away, but I wanted to honor not only Hank, but his brother, Tommy Aaron, both players who played for the Milwaukee Brewers and the Braves, and hold to this day the best career, they hit the most home runs in their career as 2 brothers. Tommy hit 1, Hank hit the rest, but they still hold the title. And this piece, I wanted to remind the city, or remind the next generation of young Black folks that, like, in spite of the things that are against us, we've always shown up with excellence, with dignity, and with the history of us. This piece is also a piece of Hank Aaron. All of these are fabric. And because I am interested in history and in storytelling, a lot of the times I will use African prints. These ones, this monochromatic kind of coloration is accented on this piece with some hand-carved linoleum. And this is the first piece I did that on, but I wanted to show Hank on his own and give him the power of presence that he had in baseball, in philanthropy, in human justice, in dignity, and give that back to us. Doing craft, whether what we're doing, if it's a cultural, really constitutes fine art. And I've decided for myself that art is in fact culture, culture is art, and that it's really important for us to continue to allow our culture to thrive and to develop and to explore our history through remixes and reimaginations of cultural elements like Adinkra prints and African wax prints, and then also the combination textiles that have been available to us. Black folks have a strong and long legacy of quilt making and textile work. And I wanted to use that unfine art choice because it was available to me, it was easy to access, and it was something that I felt really conveyed parts of my identity. So for this piece, or this series is called Witness Myths of Creation. And these images are of people that I've met over the last couple of years who left a really profound impression on me. This is Mr. Cheney, Ron Cheney of a gallery out in Kansas City. He passed away last year, but I got the chance to meet him when I was visiting there, and I sat with him in his Black-owned gallery in the Jazz District in Kansas City. And I was just so inspired by the root of culture that had taken place there that I needed to make a picture of him. This is a portrait of somebody that I met during an entrepreneurship workshop with the African American Chamber of Commerce. It's called Shaniva. This is another image of somebody that I know who I met, and I could feel the joy in her heart. I could feel her goodness. I could feel her hope. And I felt like I wanted to depict joy in my work. I think we see so much Black pain. It's so normalized that I wanted to actively combat that with quilting and with images of joy, and in particular of Black women in mages in deep joy. So this is one of my favorites in this series because I think it really embodies the kind of artwork I want to be making. It's something that I'm really proud to share with folks, especially with her. I want people to see that we see them. This is another portrait of that series. This is a local DJ, Tariq Moody. He's been really, really supportive of me in my career and exploration. He taught me actually how to get my recording in check so that I could do my project. First my Pfister project and then my Knoll project. I had a little bit more help from somebody else after, but Tariq gave me the first rundown, and that kind of made this possible. I think that's something that's really important, is because as a self-taught artist, I'm not actually self-taught. I've been invested in. I've been invested in by other artists. I've been invested in by mentors. I've been invested in by friends and families members. I've been invested in by people who didn't even know they were investing in me. And like, part of my process is working with other people, investing back into them and reflecting the things that they're bringing back to them. This is another image from the series. This is Hank Herring. He's a delight. And as you can see, he's a gestural talker. I really like to focus not only on Black faces, but also Black hands in motion, the full expression of joy, humanity, excitement, bliss, happiness. And Hank really, really embodied that for me. This is another person who did some very deep pouring into me. This is Ariane King Comer. She is an indigo dyer and batik artist who I met last year as well, during a or 2 years ago, during a pretty rough time. And I ended up sharing a room with her at the African American Quilting Convention in Kansas City. And that night, we sat at the table and we told stories, and she and Hank were both there. And they were telling me stories and offering me encouragement and making suggestions. And it was one of those moments that I think was so magical and so important to me, realizing that not only was it possible to be an artist who was supported by my work, but to be a really proud cultural artist who celebrated the culture and shared it with other people, and wasn't so much a gatekeeper as a lane guarder. So Hank and Ariane were really kind to me and supported me and offered me incredible wisdom. And that's something I think that has been a really important part of the journey. The elder folks who have supported me, including Della, have made a huge impact on my learning, on my career, on my vision, on my technique, you name it. Self-taught just means informally educated by your community. Before I get into this piece, I do want to talk a little bit about the tour. Prior to coming down to Kentucky for the residency, I decided I needed to take a little bit of time to spend time on the road and to experience the world again before I hunkered down into another place to start on work. So I started what I called the Story Catcher Tour, which was named in honor of that Zora Neale Hurston piece. And I visited 5 different cities. Over the course of 2 weeks, I drove 2,000 miles. I started in Clarksdale, Mississippi. Then I went to Macon. I'm sorry, let me start back there. So I went to Clarksdale. I made it there on the first day because I felt like if I was going to re-enter into the world, I wanted to go to a place that had cultural significance for me. So my dad's family is from Mississippi, and Clarksdale, Mississippi is the home of the legendary Blues Crossroads. I wanted to start there. because I think as much as visual art is a part of Black culture, of Mississippi culture, I think that blues and music and food are as important part of that culture. So I wanted to start there to get myself right before I got out in the world. The next place I went to was Macon, Mississippi, to visit a friend who's a genealogist. Sharon runs Our Black Ancestry and also has written several wonderful books about culture. I met her a few years ago at a hostel in New Orleans, and I was really impressed by the way that she also, as a self-taught person, was out here telling stories and helping other people identify their stories. Next, I went to New Orleans and I visited with Ava, who is the executive director of Public Allies. And we had a discussion just about kind of the state of the world and the glaring reality of the two pandemics, the pandemic of racism and the pandemic of violence. I think it was most apparent when we went to the French Quarter. All I wanted to do was get a muffaletta sandwich. I just wanted a sandwich, y'all. And I hadn't been around people most of the year. So the journey itself was one obstacle. But then when we got down to the French Quarter to get the sandwich, it was crowded. People weren't wearing masks. They were very tight together. And I panicked. So it occurred to me that while I had spent a year really concerned about the safety of my body, the safety of my mind, the safety of my friends and family, but some folks didn't have that experience and felt comfortable not only gathering, but partying. It was the first time so far that I've had to really experience that this year, and I didn't know what to make of it. So after I left New Orleans, I took it a little easier. I was driving over Lake Pontchartrain, and there was a flash flood, and there was thunder. And in that moment, I was kind of thinking to myself, okay, you're out, you did a year of really deep listening, and you had these big plans to go visit all these monuments to the civil rights movement. But in reality, you just had a whole year of struggle and of suffering. What if you just let yourself rest? What if you just spend time witnessing the people that you're here to see? And you can come back another time and see these things when you're stronger, when you have people with you, and when you haven't spent a year contemplating your own doom. So I excused myself from the remainder of the civil rights portion of my intended Storycatcher tour and decided to focus on the human component. From New Orleans, I went to Birmingham, Alabama, and I spent a day with artist Deborah Riffey, who is a phenomenal printmaker who works on Black subjects, including civil rights, agricultural, and other cultural elements. Being in her studio was kind of this re-energizing moment on this Storycatcher tour, and like to see an artist who has committed her life to this work really meant something to me. And it reminded me that I'm not the only person. I'm not going to be the only person. And not only that, but as an artist who's committed to this work, part of my job is to connect with other artists, especially younger artists, to share what I know, to share what other people have taught me. The last stop was in Atlanta, where I had the pleasure of connecting with Natasha Chambliss of Lines Gallery and the board chair of the Atlanta Printmakers Association. And she took me to a couple of events and shows that were happening in the Atlanta art scene. One of which was the Charlie Palmer retrospective at the Hammons House. Because that was my last official stop, it was a really good opportunity for me to reflect on the cultural diversity of the diaspora, even within the United States and its Blackness, from the Northern Blackness and the city Blackness of Milwaukee to the rural Delta city cultural centers, and then also like places of history. And I was really grateful to everyone I stayed with, everyone I stopped with, everyone who talked with me and told me their stories, to realize that I was a part of this thing. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit before I went on to this next part. which is about equity in the arts and creative sector. So 2020, like I told you, pandemic, DNC was supposed to be coming, that got canceled. This was the last piece that I made at my Pfister residency before it ended. I was preparing for the DNC. I was really excited about what the squad was doing, and I wanted to make a celebration of giving them their flowers now. So this piece is 24 by 36 feet, which is at the tail end of how big I can work right now. And I wanted to celebrate this group of women supporting each other in the halls of power. And I didn't really realize how a year later, these women that I celebrated would come to the foreground again, and make the stand during the insurrection to follow through with their political duties in spite of the danger to their life, in spite of threats of violence, in spite of being disrespected. With that being said, I think it's really important to acknowledge that representation does not always equal equity. So the squad, as well as there are other politicians I look up to, have gone above and beyond, not just showing up for their job, but fighting for their people, including Stacey Abrams. I made this illustration, this is a mixed media illustration. I made this illustration the night before they announced the election results because I needed to believe in my heart that the nightmare would be over. And instead of sitting in my own existential dread, I thought about the hard work of Black women who are often denied their due, but show up anyway. And when the results came in, I just about cried. And I thought about women like Stacey Abrams, who have been denied opportunity, but come through anyway and work hard and continue to show up and make their own tables and bring their people with them. So it has been a hard year. It's been a hard year, but it's been a year where I've really dived into my creative practice. It's really supported me. It's sustained me. It's helped me connect with my community. It's helped me with my wellness. It's helped me with some perspective. And I think something that we need to acknowledge is the reality that the arts and culture are the thing that remind us of our humanity. Representation is not enough. The arts can help us bring equity. To me, some of the equity includes direct access to funds for community-led initiatives, and specifically things that communities are doing for themselves, not that are being thrust upon them, but things that they want for themselves. We should be trusting and believing folks within community who have already built up the support and who have relationships with their communities. And we should be asking not what can we do for you, but how can we support you? What way can I show up? How can I help you get your message across? Do you need more table? Do you need more platform? What do you need as an artist, as a creative person, as somebody with a platform right now? How can I be here for you? So this series was kind of a response / celebration of Black mages, which is folks of marginalized gender. And this series celebrated some of the folks I saw doing incredible things. It's a multi-collaborative piece with printmaking artist Sarah Matthews, who designed the background fabrics, Akai Coit, who did these cathedral window frames. And each of these celebrates someone on the marginalized gender spectrum. So this first piece is called Alita. Alita is the second person who got my recording life together and made it possible for me to do some of the work I'm doing. She sat me down and she gave me an old school teacher lesson on how to edit this series. Alita is also part of the Black String Triage Ensemble. I'm really proud of the work that they do, and I'm really happy to support them in everything that they do because they show up in communities during times of crisis to help people process through music. So there will always be a special place in my heart for their work, but also especially for Alita, for her compassion, her commitment to education and to equity. This is Flowers. Flowers has been a part of a variety of really, really interesting cooperative economic opportunities. And I met Flowers' mom when I was doing my economic stuff through the RISE program. And I think it's really important that while we talk about equity, we make sure that our equity includes women of color, trans people, and gender nonconforming people. So the series is about that representation, that celebration, and collaboration. This is an illustration or this is a fabric piece of LaShondra Vernon. She's the executive director of Artists Working in Education. And the photograph was taken by another artist, Nicole Acosta. When I think about equity and I think about community, I think the idea of collaboration and support, and not just support in the sense of dollars, but also like administrative support, tactical support, is something that is make or break for creative opportunity, for community building on so many levels. And both Nicole and LaShondra have done phenomenal cross-collaborative building with me, and I appreciate them both so much. Of this series, I know I'm not supposed to have a favorite, but I think this is my favorite. This is a portrait of Yante Turner, and it's from a photo of Yante during the protests. From what I understand of Yante, because I haven't actually met them in real life, but their social media presence gives me warmth in my heart. But when I saw the warmth in my heart transformed into rage and anger, and I saw this image of Yante putting their body on the front lines in the protest, knowing that also Yante is a birth worker bringing life in, this is the most pro-life, radically inclusive image I've ever seen, and it is so important. So this is kind of the figural piece in this series and the things that I'm talking about. Lastly, this is Alex. Alex is just fly all the time, fly, unapologetic, deaf sign language interpreter, fashion icon, loud, non-binary, queer, excellent human. Another person I haven't met, but somebody that I see being courageous and making it safe for other people to be safe. So this series is a celebration of those things. Lastly, I think as we are moving forward in the world, the pandemic's not over. Everything's not going back to normal. We have experienced a collective trauma. We're going to have to process it. But as we do that, I think it's really, really important that we emphasize that emergency resources and things like that are being allocated by whomever they're being allocated by at any moment need to be distributed equitably. So for me, I think that first, those resources need to be directed toward groups who have been historically lacked or who've been historically impacted by lack of access. So Black and Indigenous communities in particular, people of marginalized gender, differently abled folks, historically disenfranchised communities. We all went through a lot last year. But if you're somebody who prior to last year was doing okay and has historically been doing okay, think about the folks that have been left out, who have been silenced, who have been excluded, and recommit to equity in your communities through arts, through education, through resources, through platforms. Support the things that you said you cared about last year and go forward and make sure that we don't see this again. So that's more or less what I have to say for the moment. Do we have any questions?
Thank you so much, Rosie. That was a really generative description of the practice that you cultivate as an accountability and as a social justice. I want to invite the audience members to please submit their questions either through the Q&A function or the chat function on your Zoom dashboard, and we will address them. Thank you.
Okay, I feel like there's something I did forget to mention. It's actually kind of this is a brand new to the world announcement. So the culmination of all of those things, all of these experiences, these desires, and these lessons was the reality that I don't have to do everything by myself, right? And so I'm really, really excited to announce that I've actually accepted gallery representation through Lions Gallery in Atlanta, formally. And I'm really excited to continue doing the kind of work that I'm doing with support.
Thank you so much, Rosie. We have 2 questions. Actually, now we have 4. Let's start with, how do you choose your particular color combinations? And can you tell us a little bit about your own experiences and how that feeds into your work?
Sure. Colors are kind of tricky. So I am a maximalist. I love textures. I love color. I love radiance. And when I'm doing a piece of someone, I try to think about how they make me feel. And I want the image to reflect the way that they make me feel. It's not necessarily a visual thing. It is really about just their personhood. And I try to find something that is luminous. So people have different energies, but the idea of bringing luminosity to somebody's personality and to share that with them, not even the rest of the people, but with the individual person that I'm making, I want them to see themselves the way that I see them. And so as that relates to my experience, I guess, like, I'm really lucky in that I was never embarrassed about my Blackness. It's something that has been a reaffirming gift. It's been a joy. It's been celebrated. I've been taught my history. I've been lucky. And I really want other Black folks to have that experience. So I do that with my art as best as I can.
Thank you. Another attendee asks that, or reflects that your work exudes so much joy and dignity. How does one accomplish that so consistently?
I don't know how to answer that. Show up every day, say yes to the things that you want to say yes to and mean it. I'm not going to cuss, but we call it the F yes or no principle. So if in your heart, the answer is not absolutely enthusiastic consent, the answer is no. So when you show up with your yes, and that includes showing up to my working space, when I show up to my working space, I'm showing up with a full yes. So I guess that's it.
Thank you. Another attendee says, do you see yourself stepping into a role as an elder? How do you want to fulfill that role, or do you think that role will be defined beyond you?
I think the answer is not at the moment. You know, I'm still learning. There's still a lot of people who have been here a lot longer than me, who are still teaching me things every day. And to be fair, it's not just elders who are our teachers. Like, young people can be our teachers. Marginalized people can be our teachers. The people, anybody who you are willing to be with in reality and in personhood might be able to teach you something. So whether I see myself as an elder, not necessarily, but like, I'm definitely here to help other folks who are trying to make it happen.
Thank you. What artist or artists influence your approach to textile portraiture?
All of them. My first love was printmaking. And I think, so Delita Pinchback Martin is on the list, but also, of course, Bisa Butler. Susan Carlson, who's also, she's a white textile artist who actually, like, I learned a lot from her master classes. Della Wells's work. But I also had really, really incredible teachers in school. So I went to public school, and I remember from even kindergarten, Georgia Edwards was my kindergarten teacher. And I remember her like taking really deliberate time to teach us how to be technical, not necessarily how to make a good picture, but here's the steps that you need to do to make a thing happen. You know, so I think I just get really excited about passion and storytelling. So anybody who's doing that, I love. Oh, and Vinnie Bagwell.
Similarly, a question we have from the audience is, did you find the process of creating the portraits different for the people you knew versus the people you had not met in person?
Yes. I think if it's a commission, sometimes those are tricky because I have to get the read of the person. So part of my commissioning process when I'm working with somebody that I haven't met before, I'll ask the person who's making the commission, like, okay, is there like a song that embodies this person, or what did they like? Or can you show me things that remind you of them? And I try to use that as part of that drawing in process, because like sitting down and like working with fabric is pretty intimate, you know? So anything that I'm making of my own accord, I already know what the mood is. I know what I want it to feel like. And by feel like, it's a visual feeling. But if I'm doing work for other folks, I have to really be intentional about, what do you want to feel? How do we want this to feel? And that we go from there.
A few folks are asking about what you're producing for the residency. Do you want to talk a bit without giving away too much?
I can talk a little bit. So for this residency, I am doing the largest piece of artwork that I have done to date, which is a little intimidating, but it's so far I feel good. I'm doing a piece of bell hooks for the center, and it'll be 6 feet by 3 feet when it's finished. It's in process right now. Hopefully it'll be done by the end of next week, fingers crossed. But you're gonna have to wait to see it until the center opens.
And just a plug, our center launch is on Wednesday, September 22nd from about 11:30 to 1:30 p.m. at our space in Draper 106 on Berea's beautiful campus. Another question for you, Rosie, if you don't mind. Can you describe 1 or 2 examples of community groups' ongoing work that you've learned about in this past year of travels?
So I wasn't traveling most of the year. I literally was in my home. I was not going places. Let's be clear. There was a whole pandemic and your girl didn't get vaccinated until it was like available to me. So I was at home. However, so Marquesa Tucker, African American Roundtable, she as an organizer, such radiance, such joy, such certainty. A lot of the folks that I met and worked with through the project really were just doing incredible things. I feel so lucky to have met some of them. Another person who I am just like in perpetual awe of is Melody McCurtis from Metcalf Bridges community. The on the ground grassroots organizing that she was doing for her community was so powerful. And Maila Feita made a documentary about it. That's really great. If you have a chance to watch that, totally check it out. Like there were just so many people doing such cool things.
Thank you. Do you have any suggestions or advice about how we can establish spaces and platforms to uplift marginalized voices, especially in the areas where those voices have been intentionally left out, not least of all in creative spaces?
Yes. And it's not going to be the answer I think that folks want. Sometimes you have to build your own table, because even in situations where you're being offered a platform or offered resources, or people want to help you, they don't realize sometimes that help can be harmful or damaging. If you want to support and uplift communities, especially marginalized communities, communities of color, give them your money. Give them your money without strings. Like if you have money to give it to them. You see somebody doing a good thing, support them. Create an educational opportunity. Pay for somebody's rent. Like the radical things are the things that are the human, straightforward, compassionate things that allow people to stop focusing on survival and to start dreaming. That's how you support people.
Speaking of which, an attendee asks, or says rather, that they really love what you say about Black women being denied and showing up anyway. And they say that they see you doing the same with your work and advocacy. And what is the best way for us to support your journey?
You can give money to Love on Black Women. This is an organization where a Black woman is facilitating the unrestricted fund distribution to Black women. Like, it's Love on Black Women. Look it up, give them some money, they will distribute it. That is supporting my work.
Thank you, Rosie. Now, a few people want to know if you'd ever teach.
I don't know that I have the skill to teach in the formal sense. Something I am considering is having some informal gatherings. I'm not self-taught because I don't understand things. I'm self-taught because I'm an unconventional learner. And sometimes like learning environments make me uncomfortable, but I think that some of us do learn in unconventional ways. So with that being said, like, I love getting together with other folks who want to do creative things. I don't see myself as a teacher because I know that that's a skill set that I haven't cultivated yet, but maybe someday.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Rosie, before we close out this session?
I don't know. I think, yeah, actually. So I've been thinking about this. It's not necessarily like art or whatever related, but I've been thinking about what's happening in the world as things are kind of going back to normal. And I'm remembering the idea of the essential worker. I can't stop thinking about the essential worker. I can't stop thinking about people who are service workers. I can't stop thinking about the working class and the working poor people who did not get the security of working from home and of guaranteed safety or dignity, and how for a brief moment in time, we were honoring their labor. And now there's these talks of like labor shortages and this, that, and the other thing. I don't think it's that, but part of culture is acknowledging service workers, care workers, folks who were essential during the pandemic. We did have a moment where we acknowledged that they were essential. So I just kind of want to remind folks of that.
Thank you so much, Rosie. And thank you for joining us this month as the inaugural Artist in Residence, and for the piece that you are so creating with such care and deliberation. So I appreciate that. And we thank you here at Berea College. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We hope you'll tune in person on September 22nd for our launch, where you can see Rosie's piece displayed. Thank you again.